Hi, welcome to CSA Bangalore chapter and Cyber AI insights from CSO CISA Bangalore chapter. I'll start. Welcome to CSA Bangalore chapter and Power of Knowing Forums LinkedIn live session. We are on the topic discussion of cyber sec- cyber AI and IIM are reinventing trust in the cloud beyond passwords. Your go-to podcast and how AI and cyber security impacting the world. I am your host Prem Kumar. Yes, today we are exploring how IAM will impact the cloud beyond passwords. A special welcome to all tuned to Power of Knowing Forum and CSA Bangalore chapter CI Cyber AI Insights episode 232 LinkedIn live session. To have this topic discussed, we have Ravi Chhetri, Identity Access Management Architect, joining us. L- let's welcome our esteemed speaker to our podcast event. Let's dive into the topic. Hi, Ravi. There was a small technical glitch. That's where we had to take a small 3 minutes delay. Without further ado, Ravi, would you like to introduce yourself and give a background to the audience about yourself and your journey on the podcast arena? Uh,
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much again, Mr. Prem, for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast and then sharing knowledge around identity and access management. And I wish and I hope that this will be a very informative session for all your listeners and viewers. Right. So, to begin with, I started initially as a system engineer back in 2013 with L&T.
mhm,
Tried finding out multiple options. I was working with network and systems and VMware, multiple things. Then soon I was able to identify that security is something that I really belong to, and I then switched into my roles into security. And at that moment, I was not aware that it was identity back in
mhm.
2013, 14, 15, right? So, but then gradually I walked through various roles and landed as a consultant role. And from there, I would say the actual IM journey began in products like Ping, Okta. We have Entra, ForgeRock, multiple products around the IM space. And currently, I'm working as a senior staff identity architect at G Healthcare.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, Ravi.
Mhm.
I think what you said is right. This is cyber security now. The earlier pointer was network security, right? So
Mhm.
we didn't have anything called as a cyber security
Yes.
at that point.
Mhm.
All have, see, if you've seen our journey has
Mhm.
been predominantly on, first we had security, then it became network security, then it
Mhm.
became information security. Now we call that as cyber security, right? So that's how the journey is turned out. What does trust in the cloud really mean beyond passwords, and why we are getting it wrong? Is the first pointer that I would like to understand from you, Ravi.
So first, we need to understand that password have and will always be the weakest link. We
Mm.
cannot be relying on password, and I believe everyone knows this, right? We have, and now we need to talk about various cloud environments, right? And currently, even in the cloud, we are just relying on username and password primarily, which is definitely one of the gap that I see. We cannot build a secure ecosystems if passwords are one of our primary factors, right? And sometimes I see MFA is optional, and especially I'm talking about um like APAC countries where we are still trying to evolve. Identity life cycle is still manual. I mean, and overall, if you see, because of these weakest links or gaps, the trust in the cloud means just putting the username and password. But ideally, it should be more than just verifying a login, and then we should gradually move towards validating the access, the context, the behavior, right, using terms or technologies in AI and ML, and then try to evolve as we move further. So I mean, in my view, a truly, I would say, trust definitely means we should know the source, we should know the device, we should know the location, we should know what access they have. If we are evaluating all of this context, and gradually then we should be able to come to a point where we finally say, okay, here is a trusted session or a trusted user, and then go from there.
Now, in your experience, where does IIM fail in the most design development or user alignment? Where does it fail?
So, one, I mean, I have couple of areas where I can talk about where I am is but definitely failing. Is the first is definitely on the authentication piece. We are still relying on a fixed authentication, right? Where we log in at 9, you have like maybe a 10 hour of access, and then you log off maybe after 10 hours or after 10 hours, right? That is the first implementation gap. Organization who are on the initial stage feel that that is the best that they can achieve, but that was back in maybe 5 years ago. Second is even now the current reason why IGA platforms are struggling is because it has so many overprivileged or over permission users, like, and the best part is we do not even have visibility, right? That is one. Third, in terms, in the name of implementing MFA, we have created a MFA fatigue world where everyone is just constantly being prompted for MFA, right? One after the other. And we feel that is a secured environment. And I know currently the hottest trend is around NHI, non human identities. It is definitely going to scale up drastically. And to kind of summarize this, one of the important piece here is siloed identity system. Even now when I go and talk to a guy managing IGA, he or she doesn't have a clue about what's happening on the access world or on the even on the leadership side, right? So these are the five main points that I feel is the primary current gap that I see in the IM space, that is kind of risking the entire implementation, and organizations feel that they are at par with the security, but these gaps always remain in the identity system. And to add one more point, Mr. Prem, so because you have all these gaps, that is where you have scenarios like identity breaches. If I talk about the Uber breach, right? Three takeaways from there.
Yeah.
Weak second factor, no conditional or risk based authentication. Like you have access, you are there in for a while, for 10 hours, for 20 hours, for 7 days, sometimes even in a lot of situation, right? And then accounts have been given over permission. Yes, there are a lot of tools that are coming up to kind of identify those, but then we can discuss this further. But MFA fatigue, social engineering were the primary reason for the Uber breach, right? So, and then that's where we should learn that MFA is just not enough. There are so many ways hackers have already figured out through social engineering or through MFA fatigue, DDoS, credential stuffing, that these all can be breached, and it's not that secure.
You're right in saying that, Ravi. I think we still feel there are a lot of things that are left behind, because I was talking to one of the other speaker
Mhm.
about a month back on IAM, where we were discussing on the pointer that you are saying, right? Where access is given and we don't know how long that access is. We don't have a review mechanism once the access
Mhm.
is given.
Mhm.
Who's taking the access? How long is it necessary? What kind of an access is required? And there are cases where you find people moving up the ladder but still have the access,
Yes,
and they
absolutely.
still want to keep that access. I don't know on what basis they want to have that access, but if you have that access, we are not. I think one way we are vulnerable, and the other
Mhm.
way we are saying is that review and mechanism that is not in place. That's what I think. Some of the places where we find a challenge.
Mhm.
Can identity be a new digital perimeter, or are we over relying on that concept?
Like, I would just want to go back, maybe back in 2020,
Hmm.
when this whole buzz started, right? Identity is the new perimeter. And and at that moment, definitely we had the entire network being one of the perimeter, right? You had firewalls and WAF trying to protect the overall thing. But eventually, the reason why I feel identity is the new perimeter, but not the only perimeter, right? Is because uh, every attacker, right, that you analyze and understand are eventually, whether it is through cloud or through ransomware or any type of attack, Eventually the only thing that they need is one pair of credential. That's the only reason they are doing all of this, right? Whether they need access of
It's an
data,
entry that they want.
entry
That
that they want, right?
yeah,
Now
yeah.
that is also one of the reason why identity should be the new parameter, because eventually we all should be focused on protecting that identity through a
Mhm.
layered defense model. Not saying identity should only be protected through identity tools, right?
Mhm.
So perimeter definitely has shifted, because post COVID we have moved remote, right? We
Mhm.
are so much API focused. There is
Yeah.
so much of SaaS build up that has gone, right? So the entire infra which was inside has moved out. So now how do we protect everything and bring together? So eventually the entry point is the identity only. So identity is the common denominator, I would say, across every device, system, apps, location that you are using. Right now, that's where we feel that identity is growing to be more like a perimeter. But at the same time, I would like to conclude that it is not identity that you just focus on and improve. It should be a layered defense model where you have tools like WAF, you have device endpoint protections, you have identity protection, all working together in a layered defense model, eventually protecting the identity. Because once that is breached, I mean, the entry point is compromised.
On saying that, but what would make that to go away, Ravi? Because that's a common challenge that we are seeing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What See, we've been talking IAM from the AD days, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we started AD, we had group policies and user policies. Then that's the same thing that is moved to a separate tool. Maybe we can say it is identity and access management
Mm-hmm.
now,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, that still remains as a challenge where the audit and other stuff is happening, and that's how can small and mid-sized businesses think like enterprises when it comes to cloud IAM, right? So your view on it.
So, one thing that I would like to discuss here is when we talk about small, mid enterprise level, right? The first thing is they should not think that identity access management is a small kind of a project that because of compliance or because of security they should have it. It should first be a program, right? It should be looked holistically. And definitely the current new age CISOs and CTOs are trying to get more exposure through the various events that is happening. So first it should be a program. Second, simply implementing uh, an MFA solution just for the sake of MFA solution is not going to work. There should be a maturity model of MFA. Now here, definitely password, username, and password is one of them. Uh, you have the levels of MFA where you can go from password to PIN to maybe a TOTP, and then move on to FIDO, cryptography, human trusted intermediaries. That is the plan that they should have. Because again, from a SME perspective, they may be implementing something that is been there from last 5 6 years. But one thing to keep in mind is hackers have already figured out through social engineering, right? The third and the most important for SMEs is even though they would have implemented it, the weakest link is always the user, right? And many countries, right, this has still been a problem where a small, um, let's say, a social engineering could kind of compromise the entire account. And then that could be an admin account, that could be a non-admin account. Eventually the hackers are in, and there are many instances of breaches where hackers have set and done kind of reconnaissance for a very long time, and eventually they were able to do a privilege escalation from there, get access, create identities, and sit there and
Yeah.
observe, right? So that would be some of my input on SMEs, that they should mature, not just install and be there.
I think the pointer what you are giving is once an implementation done, there should be a review, is what you are
Mhm.
saying, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I think that's the mechanism that we should look at.
Mhm.
I'll go back to my CISO days or CIO days where we used to do is audit the access management policy uh,
Mm.
and the user access rights every 3 months.
Yes.
So that's what we used to do, part of the IAM structure, and we used to say these are the people who left the organization. Their
Mm.
offboarding is done. Do you need anything that is there? Something like that. We need to look at. Those are pointers that we used to look at, and that's where I think one of the major pointers we were looking was to review every 3 months and then look at how do we remove accesses which are not required, right?
Okay, stale
And
orphan accounts, right?
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So why is AI essential now in identity management, not just cool tech layer?
So, one thing is definitely AI has taken up at a very high pace, right, across the industry, not just identity access management. But we need to understand, although it is essential, but at the same time, there are two aspects to it. One is, I'll just talk about what are the uh, key things that we can achieve with AI. First is detection of anomaly, which is like a function which currently sits with the SOC team, right, is integrated with identity systems, because now really do not have to set up multiple correlation rule on a seam SOAR platform and then work with multi teams and then decide if there was a breach, if there was a kind of a prevention thing or a detection that has happened. Your detection has come inside one single platform. Okay, that is one. Second is, as you were just talking about, right, access decisions, access reviews, which is a pain for a lot of CISOs, can be automated with AI. It can be dynamic now. Okay.
Hmm.
Third is life cycle predictions. Currently, there is a lot of kind of effort, money uh, is being going into solving the JML problem, the joiner mover lever problem, right?
Hmm.
Now, if imagine the whole thing can be predicted. Let's say there are a certain set of attributes that you have already fed in, whether it's generative AI or any other AI model, and they know that for a specific location, for a specific set of users, if they have certain attribute, this is the process that they should be following. Yes, there is a stage to it. We need to go through, let's say, a work. Initially, it will be a automation to getting into AI, but that is the other thing. Second, and the most important, definitely, is streamlining the entire access process. Currently, I would say managers and leaders get bombarded with so many different emails around access reviews, right? 100 emails, 50 emails, and it is definitely time taking. So, how do
Yeah.
we know that if a user has left, again, based on certain parameter, the review can be performed automatically? So, these are some of the main thing from a governance perspective, right? I'll talk about one more important thing from fighting the insider threats or the security threats here as well. As security threats are evolving, I'll be very honest, we humans cannot evolve at the scale, or we engineers or people who are safeguarding the organization, right? It's difficult to scale ourselves with the way hackers are evolving, and that is a reality we should know. So can there be someone trained to ensure that even a small security attack that has happened can be tracked, eventually the evaluation done over there, and similar correlation is set up here, right? So those kind of thing AI, so these are the 4 to 5 things that I feel AI can help us to be implemented in these IM systems.
No, point taken.
Mhm.
What I see from a AI on the cyber security side is it is more looking at the mundane jobs that are there,
Mhm.
are to be automated. Now, what you said is again access. Zero trust can be automated where we give when a request is there and there is something that you can put. I
Mhm.
think that's the way I think IAM is going to play a role and see giving access and just in time access and all these things are there anyway there, right? So,
Absolutely, yeah.
so only challenge I see from an IAM standpoint is the person who's giving the access should be in a position to tell this is the period that this access has to be there and train the AI model in such a way that if an access is given in saying that it has to do an audit saying that this was set for 1 day, 2 day, is it still required?
Mhm.
I think should be a trigger which should come in and say this is access given to him. You want to revoke it or you want to continue? That's what I think could be one way of looking at AI.
Absolutely. And again, one thing just to add on to your point, Mr. Prem, is this is basically, this all depends on how we train the models,
Hmm.
right? Now, a phase before that definitely is everything should be there in place. Then we use models to train them. But for all organization, the phase one is always to implement it using the principles uh, of architecture and then have that in place and run it for maybe a year or few months. And once we know that there is a process defined, the thing then can later be kind of put them into a model, trained, and then AI takes over. But there are two phases to it, but you're absolutely right. I
Seems
think
to be
that's, yeah.
there seems to be a technical issue in the link. I think it is putting off on mute at sometimes.
Okay, okay.
So, I'm going on mute suddenly and I am not able to unmute it. Okay, so when you look at what is the common IAM mistake that you've seen experienced architects or CISOs make, because
Hmm.
IAM again, it's the heart of the organization, right?
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
how do you look at that piece, Ravi?
uh, so fine. Here we should know as CISOs, right? I mean, I definitely all the CISOs and CEOs, CTOs who are on the executive are well aware of how the world is going towards in the cybersecurity. But identity isn't about tech and tools and product and installation. It's about enabling secure, um, kind of friendly user experience, frictionless user experience for helping people with the task that they are currently doing. Right now, some of the big ones that I would want to get into is underestimating the identity lifecycle complexity. We always look at IAM as solving the JML process, the joiner mover lever process, right? And then do not identify what could be the complexity that goes beyond it, because there are multiple user personas, right? You have employees, you have contractors, you have partners, you have customers, so many user personas. Is it that simple to just put up one policy and fix it for all? No, it's not. So that is one of the thing, underestimating the life cycle. Second, as I was mentioning earlier, IM is not a project, right? It's a program. We need to evolve, we need to mature. Yes, there will be friction when you're implementing something like PAM, when you're kind of putting all the data together, doing access mining and all of this during the IG. It is definitely time taking. There are frictions around application team, but as leader, there should be a support. There should be a buy-in from the sponsors, right? Second thing is we try to, and this is one of the common thing that I've seen is on the engineering level. I've seen a lot of uh, architects even, right, or leaders trying to over engineer a lot of things. Everything as a phase one, phase two, phase three, phase four. So this is one way where they try to kind of build the best PAM tool, build the best PAM system or IGA system or an access system, and that's where they fail, because there are so many things to analyze and they are just stuck there, right? And these are all the implementation ones. Then it comes to neglecting the governance, neglecting cleanup, neglecting monitoring, metrics, right? Because of which, even if it is implemented, there is no visibility to anyone in the management of what is happening, where we are, what is the phase one, how many people have registered, how many apps have been onboarded. So these are some of the big ones that I see as one of the challenges there.
Point taken. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, I understand that point. Now, what would be one way we look at the security by design evolved over cloud native and AI driven worlds?
Okay. Security by design, if we think, initially we had a, as an architect, we had a checklist, right?
Mm,
Add firewalls, add encryption for security. You have a kind of strong algorithm. You had um, maybe a proper rule configured for a username and password, do a pen test and testing and all of this, right? It was compliance driven, reactive, right? But now, as we move forward, right, we need to be more adaptive, we need to be more kind of uh, intentional. Like it should be a part of the whole architecture. Security is a part of the architecture, not an add-on. That is what we need to understand. Okay, so it should always start with understanding the user requirement, the current scenario, current state. Understanding is always important. There cannot be a checklist which is like, okay, here is a problem statement, 5 checklists done. That's not how we should be moving on. We should always understand the current state, move on by mapping all the pointers, the problem statement, and then try to find out what checklist, what processes works for what type of systems. And it's again about building trust and not enforcing controls just for the sake of compliance and user experience.
Point taken there. Now, how does a persona in IAM architecture reflect real human behavior, and how do we design for that kind of a solutions?
So again, this is an interesting question, Mr. Prem, because personas, I was just talking in one of the point earlier, it plays a really important role because without understanding the persona, without understanding the real customer, the real use cases that you're solving, it's really difficult to kind of design something. So high level personas have always been employees and customers and maybe partners and suppliers and humans and non-human accounts, right? But that is soon going to be obsolete because it should not be just based on the roles and responsibilities, even further down on the application level, like manager, developer, uh, contractor, and all. It should be based on how people are interacting with different systems, based on the access, based on the risk that we have, right? It should have business context, it should have behavioral traits, right? And that's where AI models, AIML comes very handy. Access should be given for a period of time, just in time access that you were talking. Life cycle transitions should be happening. Let's say someone is moving up the ladder, right? Or they are kind of going across to a different team. How are we able to manage them? So to summarize this whole thing, for me, it's basically a human behavior is constantly changing, and we should have in mind the role, the contextual way in which the work is happening, how the offboarding process is there, right? And we should kind of consider all these in mind before kind of just putting a blanket persona. Because an employee also, you may, if I go further down on the behavioral and context, there could be different personas, right? If I go on the contractor, there could be different personas. So we really need to go a little bit deep down, understand the behavioral traits, the access they need over the time, the transitions that is happening, and then decide.
No, you made a point where you said where when vendor is there, you need to have a different persona. Right?
Mhm.
When you integrate vendor systems, also there needs to be a kind of check, which I think is very important for having a vendor system given access to our systems, which
Hmm.
I think is a very crucial point when we bring in outside systems into the network, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
That's one thing. And most of the time what we've seen is vendor systems are not maintained with the security posture as what the enterprise class systems are maintained, right?
Absolutely. Hmm.
That's one challenge.
Mhm.
Now, keeping that, what would be the uh, myth about identity and access management that every CEO should stop believing, right? So I think what we are saying earlier was what they should know, but
Hmm.
there are so many myths that they should not believe is what we are trying to find out.
Yes, yeah.
That's the point I wanted to understand from you, Ravi.
Okay. So, I mean, definitely, I mean, this, mm, from my view, could be a myth. Again, as I said, there are new age CISOs and CTOs, right, who are definitely considering IM as one of the key aspect to the overall cybersecurity. But for me, the primary thing that I've seen is IM is just an IT security issue, not a business priority. Like, Even now there is so much time and effort that goes to explain the business executives about the criticality of IM, right? I mean, yes, we do have many things around cybersecurity, from security architecture to SOC, multiple things, right?
I'll take one point here
Yeah.
because you made a very important point.
Mhm,
Now, I see that you are telling a pointer where you're talking about business knowing about IA.
mhm, mhm,
I'll go back little backwards and say
mhm,
security was considered a cost center earlier, right? So still, still the businesses still think security
mhm,
is waste of time at most of the cases, and that is being changed after the cloud is coming. Right now,
mhm,
you really look at, people did not understand what exactly was the pointer that cloud should be looking at.
mhm.
When they migrated from the imprint to cloud,
Wow.
then the security issues were listed out, and people started looking at security, identity theft,
Mhm,
and all those things happening, and they made serious. Now, coming into IAM,
mhm,
people should understand that every digital asset that is there connected to the internet is an IAM pointer which has to be brought under the control, right?
yes.
Whether you use MDM or you used any other tools, you will have to bring every digital asset under the IAM purview, right? What
Mm,
you think about
absolutely.
it, right?
Absolutely.
Now, what you said also was whether businesses are looking at IAM at a very minute level. I think that's the shift that we should look at from the businesses, saying that IAM is the core of the system, because without IAM being there,
Mhm,
you will not get access to any of the resources that you are going to use, whether it is servers, whether it is your portals,
mhm.
whether it is your APIs or whatever, your applications, whatever, right?
Absolutely.
Am I right in saying that, Ravi?
Yes, absolutely. And one thing that I I definitely echo that with you. And one pointer that I make a lot of the time with my fellow practitioners, right, is if I take out any tool, any technology, right, let's say AI or
Hmm.
cloud, right,
Okay.
every organization has a different way of considering those tools. Let's say AI is more of a maturity model for an organization. If
Hmm.
I'm starting an organization, I'll not first implement AI, right,
Yeah.
or I'll not jump into cloud. I may not immediately have a SOC or a lot of things around compliance. Yes, everything comes one by one. But
Yeah.
what is the first thing that an organization should think about the moment they start their organization? Two things:
Hmm.
employee and customer, right? So, one slogan that I say is IM is used by every organization that has either employee or customer.
Hmm.
Now, if those are important, definitely, right? Employee security, customer user experience security is definitely and should be the most important priority.
Yeah.
If those are managed by IM, eventually that system who's managing the employees and customers that an organization is supporting should also be the highest priority. So that shift is something that we should start looking for. And we should always consider that identity is the center for
Hmm.
employees, for customers, for partners, everything. And there is a pro and con that I see. Poor IM definitely is will cause frictions, will cause access delays, onboarding issues, security threats, bad user experience, everything. But a greater IM program is always going to help you better user experience, better compliance, and better security.
Okay. Now, with that,
Mhm,
IAM being the core,
mhm,
we've been living with remembering passwords for a very
mhm,
long
mhm,
time, right? And there has always been a question: do we need passwords to be kept again, right? And why
mhm,
don't we automate it without passwordless? And there is a token-based system that can be looked at. MFA came in and stuff
mhm.
like that.
Yeah,
Now, passwords are dying,
yeah.
but what is the truly replacement of them, and how should we adopt our mindset for that? So, is there a future ahead looking at replacing the passwords completely?
Absolutely. Passwords are obsolete. It's almost dying, but at the same time, uh, what is going to replace them, right?
Yeah.
And how should we adopt our mindset? Because it's been there for almost like how many decades? More than like many decades, right?
When the system
System
started
started.
coming in, I think we can take it back to the 60s here, where
Yes.
the military started using. That's where the password started, right? So I
Mhm.
still have them. Yeah.
Yeah. So decline is happening definitely because passwords are weak. It is phishable. We are seeing multiple incidences of people reusing the same password, right? And all of this. But what is going to replace, as I was talking, there are different modules here. And over here comes the entire MFA maturity model or authentication system maturity model, right? Now, there are multiple articles that I have been listening, and recently I was going through an article from Hyper, right? And over there they have given us the reason why passwords should not be there, because there are almost like close to about 70% of the attacks that has happened is only because of weak password, right? Now here comes things or technologies like passkeys. You have FIDO, you have device based, context based authentication based on behaviorals signals, and that is what we should be looking for moving forward as an organization. Yes, you have the password, you have the pin based, you have the OTP based, and then you have further I would say push notifications, right? Then you have the FIDO, and then you have cryptography, and you have again Windows Hello for Business is also there, where they are implementing these FIDO mechanism. So that is the shift that we are seeing. But again, the only reason we'll be able to get into that maturity model is if we start having that mindset shift is required. Like we should move away from what we know to what we have, right? That means let's say a
Yeah, I think
YubiKey.
your
Right.
point is valid, but
Mhm.
there are, the change that we want to bring in is something which people don't want to adopt, right? There is resistance always when there is a
Yes.
change which is brought in.
Mhm.
So, looking at, can zero trust be the human centric, or is that a buzzword contradiction at the moment?
Zero trust, as the principle says, never trust, always verify, right? It sounds really uh, cool, rigid, but again, it goes back to the implementation, right? I mean, definitely, I'll just talk about the few things that we should know in the zero trust world. It is definitely not a buzzword. Organizations have been implementing it really well, but the first thing on the zero trust is definitely to have a context aware trust sympathy trust system, right? Because when we talk about uh, never trust, always verify, what is
Mm.
going to always verify and what is being verified? We are
Yeah.
going to verify the user, we are going to verify the device, the location. So there should be a constant evaluation. That is one thing. Second, and this is where coming to your point where this would help us with user adoption, because right now users do not want to move out of password because there will be some gadget that they have to carry, right? Or something that they have to always carry, and then there is a push and so many things. That's one reason why they don't want to. But the
Mm.
moment you go to zero trust, you go into adaptive authentication mode, which for a user it's like sometimes they get the username and password screen, but the more the trust is getting built, the username prompt goes away, the MFA prompt goes away. So for them, if I go and tell a user that now you are using username and password for let's say about 3 times in a day, after 2 months, we will definitely implement a stronger, let's say a passkey or maybe a FIDO way, but you'll not be prompted because you have the zero trust principle in place and you are doing constantly the adaptive authentication. So that these two in combination, that's where I feel zero trust will be very apt for situations where you are trying to get user experience, adaptability, at the same time improve the security.
Very important points around that. Now, what is one IAM design principle that you would never compromise, and why?
So again, circling back to the zero trust model, there are 5 principles in zero trust, right? The basic one is least privilege. Simple. You start from there. You may build a very robust system, but if everyone has access to a lot of systems, your roles are not defined, and they can log into anyone. There is nothing being monitored or tracked. So it violates the entire least privilege model. So least privilege is something that I would uh, kind of say that it is something that should be non-negotiable, because it minimizes the surface attack. It limits the entire blast radius that we have, right? Imagine a credential is compromised. Uh, Now, based on the least privilege, that person or whoever is the admin had access to a particular server for specific period of time, and now they do not have access, although they are admin, but they do not have access. So even if the account are compromised, the hackers kind of, you are cutting down or limiting the entire blast radius, right, or the attack surface. And also it encourages better hygiene across the organization, because now the CISO can be rest assured that even if there is a breach, even if there are attacks happening, because of the principle of least privilege, all your accounts have gone back to the default state and they are not roaming around with high privilege access.
Got that pointer. Now, coming to the next point that I just wanted to add one point
Yes,
where
please.
we were talking about design part,
Mhm.
default design, design by default, right? That's what we spoke about sometime
Mm,
back.
yeah,
Now, coming to IAM, should we adopt a policy that is default by design, or
I would say definitely that is not something that we should be doing. And one reason to complement that is, and this was again something that I had discussed in my previous topic as well, that without knowing the current state, if we
hmm,
have a checklist,
yeah,
and here is the checklist, just implement this design and get the outcome, that is never going to work correctly.
yeah.
Because unless until you know the current state, you do not know the integration point of various system. Let's say even if you are integrating an IJ system, do we know how many HR system is there? Do we know how many directories are there? What are the different user personas, right? Different applications, different policies for different user personas. That is basically knowing the current state. Again, according to the NIST framework also, the first thing is identify, then you protect, recover, respond, detect. That is the other part. First is identification of the current state. So without that, default template definitely is not, I feel it will never be a working model. And hence, because of these repetitive mistakes, organizations are falling back to maybe after 2 months knowing that, okay, we didn't cover this use case. We failed to kind of cover the user personas, right? There was one workflow which was not built. And now going back and doing all of this is definitely a pain and time taking from every angle, right? The cost, the time, effort, everything goes waste here.
Coming to another pointer which I wanted to add there is
Mm.
default by design and security by design, security by default.
Hmm.
When it comes to IAM, what should be the first pointer to implement? Design or by default?
Security by design, looking at the current, as I was talking, the current state means the current design. That's how we should be starting. By default is like following a template again, Mr.
Okay.
Prem, right?
It may fall into that bracket whether you want to defaultly use or it may not fall. That's the point that you're trying to tell.
Yes, yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
What what would be the pointer where you've seen an IM fail during a team culture or a leadership mindset?
So, I mean, definitely this is um, something that we see very common, okay, more often than you would expect. Uh, and I would want to summarize this or start by saying the tech was fine, the people part broke it, right? Now,
I'll add to that. Technology is simple. We are complicating. It's not.
yes, yeah. So now the other is one reason why I have seen all of this happening. I'll just go one by one. First is the lack of executive buy-in. A lot of the time I've seen IM leaders fighting to kind of improve the security, the user experience, have a proper governance. But the moment they go up the ladder, right, for discussions and all, it all boils down to the cost, right? And because of no uh, kind of budget, or there is no urgency that the executive feel that it should be implemented, that is one of the main reason, lack of executive buy-in. And I've seen multiple projects fail there. Second is silos across team. You have so many teams and eventually everyone has to go and fall under the IM bucket, whether you are in the IGA world, PAM world, or on the access world, doing anything, SSO authentication, privilege management, or you are managing the entire governance. You have to work together to understand that if something is broken, and if it is because of the identity system, there should be someone to come and fix it, right? The other is focusing on tools and not on outcomes. We are constantly focusing on okay, here are the 5 tools, let's evaluate which can give us the basic set of use cases, and then what is the pricing, fine, you win and we implement. But what is the outcome that we are trying to see here? Yes, that is a good way to do the initial evaluation, but we should also look at um, the way that that particular tool is going to take us to that maturity model, the outcome that we expect. And that outcome can come after a year, after 2 years, or after 3 years. So we should be kind of maturing our IM program and looking for a tool that is also maturing together. And the fourth one is definitely resistance to change from a user perspective, from an executive perspective. I mean, we always see that resistance. And because of which I've seen these are the main 4 points, I would say, Mr. Prem,
Mm.
where IM programs have failed very often.
Okay. Now we're talking about the failure part. Now, how can freshers and mid-level engineers start thinking like IAM from day one? Because IAM is a critical thing. As we've been talking, it's a backbone of an organization when it comes to access, right?
Yeah, yeah.
How do we look at giving that kind of an access to freshers and mid-level engineers start thinking IAM and looking at architecting IAM from day one?
So again, this is one of my favorite topic because I deal with a lot of engineers kind of trying to educate them, creating awareness about IAM, right? So, one definitely is the shift in the mindset from just going, doing my task, and then coming to kind of understanding how the system behaves. That is a small mindset shift, but it is definitely going to create huge changes if we start just going from a doing my job to understanding the system, right? Understanding why I have been given the access, what is going behind the access, how if I'm logging in, I'm going through so many systems. When I join as a new hire, there are so many things that is happening. How do we know, right? And the other thing is connecting those that I'm doing currently as a tech, right? I'm doing to business outcomes. If I'm doing something, how is it tagged to a business outcome? So that's these are some of the things that I feel should we should keep in mind, right? Understand the architectural pattern. Um, and one of the important thing that I see a lot of people lack is documentation. If you start documenting, have KBs, right, people will be more familiar and they'll start knowing the systems well.
The documentation has been a challenge that
Yeah.
we see everywhere. Now, what's your take on identity depth? And
Identity, yeah, please, please.
do we create a tech debt unknowingly in the IAM design?
Yes, if not done well, as we were, I mean, so far all the discussions have been about improvement, about maturing, right? But that is the future state. But currently we have so many over provision roles, we have manual workflows, we have orphan accounts, we have too many exception rule created. Let's say we have a process in place, some user will come, okay, I need it in the other way around, here is the exception. Who's going back and fixing those exceptions? Who's going to fix those workflows that were only meant for few set of people? How do we standardize them? How do we automate the entire workflows? So all these are just sitting there and lying. And that's where, if I'll just circle back to the SME part as well, that that could be a phase one, but phase two definitely should be having metrics in place, monitoring all of these gaps, and then building a phase two where a lot of tools, right? We have so many tools around the IM space, from SailPoint to Ping to Okta. All of them are actually going to help you mature. It's not you fix and just keep it there, right? And it hurts because kind of it exposes your system. The risk is so high as you move forward, because there are so many accounts, orphan accounts lying around, roles are not been provisioned well. The compliance, you have an auditor and there are multiple fines being asked to pay. I mean, organizations have to pay because they're even though they had a tool, it didn't do the job right, right? And eventually what happens, executives lose interest, and because there are constant money being poured on these programs. So that's where we need to kind of just take a back and then start with models like least privilege, have regular access uh, in place, right? We need to treat again IAM as a living system and not a one time thing we leave it. So if we have these constant discussions, we mature over a period of time, that's where we will be moving out of the debt, or a process where we can get out of the debt. But debt is there for real, and it is not going away unless we start taking actions.
Now, can you? I don't know. I think we are talking about trust and stuff like that
Mhm.
and impact on it. How does AI impact the trust loop between user, system, and identity?
So far that now AI again, I'll just go a little bit back and talk about the first framework, right, where we are doing everything manually, then we automated. Now, eventually, when we are starting to do this, we want to use or introduce AI, right? Now, the trust loop definitely is user plus identity system. And what you do with the user when it goes inside an identity system, you start doing access decision. Okay. Now, access decision, let's talk about the authentication framework here. AI first helps you kind of build a continuous access evaluation process, right? You're continuously evaluating the time of access, the location, the IP, the device, all of this. That is one way AI helps you build that trust. Because constantly you're evolving, you're knowing who the user is. If there are any higher risk, if there is a user that you do not know, you eventually kind of put a high factor MFA. You do that. Second, AI helps you do dynamic risk scoring. Okay, it gives you real time risk, and that is only possible when you're evaluating the trust, right? And going back to the IGA part, you have the just in time access, continuously evaluating who the user is, where they have access, how can the access be revoked, if it is for 10 minutes, have the work been done, right? And then anomaly detection, which we were talking about, how the SOC and SIEM system is now integrated with identity, and we have things like ITDR, identity threat detection systems, right? That's where that whole system helps you with anomaly. So all these are you can leverage these using AI. Eventually, the outcome is building the trust across user and systems.
So at that point,
Mhm,
what's the disruptive trend that IAM you believe will be the industry standard?
mhm,
We're talking about evolving every now and then because just
mhm.
evolving of AI has been very, very this one. Now, what disruptive trend in IAM would you believe will be the industry standard in the next 2 years? Right.
So there are many, right, from zero trust to we have the FIDO on the MFA side. We have AI being there on the governance. But one thing that I would want to I mean, that stands out for me, and there was a lot of discussion going around, is the decentralized identity. Right now, everyone is again trying to solve the identity and the password problem internally. This is going to be a great um, revolution, I would say, a disruptive in the trend, because this is kind of now moving from owning your own identity, right? You're the enterprise or the cloud, they are not going to own it. You're going to own it, right? You are using blockchains, you are using verifiable credentials now to share what is needed. It eliminates the centralized system of password management. And I was just seeing one of the example, any platform you log in, you already have the credentials with you. You just go verify, you're done. No one is having to manage, no password complexity. Organizations doesn't have to store anything, set up multiple password, audit, everything goes away. Access becomes portable for you, friction drops, and eventually IAM evolves from who you are in the system to who you are, but cryptographically. Eventually there's a cryptographic uh, kind of system behind, right? And you're now moving into bring your own identity framework with the DID, right? And again, there are a lot of organizations like paying Okta already doing a lot of work around it. So this, I feel, is kind of with the DID we will find shift from systems to user, and this is definitely something that will be interesting to see again from a user adoption as well.
Coming to my final question that I have with you
Mhm.
for the session, and we are on top of the hour as well. If you could go back to the first IAM project, what
Mhm.
would you do differently and why?
So that is again, I may need few seconds because to evaluate what was my some of the common thing. First, definitely is I literally clearly didn't have any idea about the current state,
Hmm.
right? Business requirements. There was no mapping of business requirement. We were simply implementing something. Okay, so that is one thing. Second, aligning with multiple systems because there are multiple systems that we need to talk. Those things were not aligned there. Documentation, it lagged big time, right? And metric setup, as I was talking about, we were implementing, but what is the future? No clarity. So setting up metrics, putting proper documentation, doing identity roadmap, putting proper monitoring and detection mechanism in place, having this all of this communicated to leadership in the plain language, not too much technical through metrics. These are the four, five things that I would definitely want to implement in my AM project, and that definitely would have created a lot of value.
I think with that, I would like to summarize what we discussed. We on this from the start of the session, we spoke about. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I just wanted to see how I can summarize it for
Mm,
the betterment of the audience. We started with what is cloud and what does beyond passwords mean and stuff like
mhm,
that, and then we spoke about design. Where should we look when IAM fails, more on the design side, deployment side, or the user alignment side. Then we spoke about digital perimeter, how small and mid-sized businesses think like enterprise when it comes to cloud IAM. What are the AI essentials now identity access management should look at a cool
mhm,
tech layer? What are common IAM mistakes that CISOs do or architects look at and experience? How do you own or review security by design, evolve cloud native in AI driven world stuff?
mhm,
About identity and access management through CEO should stop believing one myth. That's what we spoke about. We spoke about zero trust, where it's about human centric part. Then we spoke about IAM design principles, about four or five is what you said,
mhm.
right?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Five principles. And what is the IM failure due to which a cultural or a leadership mindset happened? That's what we spoke about. And
Mhm,
when we give IAM being the core system critical to the organization, to freshers and mid-level guys, what would be the repercussions, or how do they look at starting at one day, and how do we do start from the start of the first day? And then we spoke about identity depth, where we have tech debt,
mhm,
unknown belief, and we spoke about trust loop. We spoke about IAM relatability in stuff of technology and how the old this one, and then we just shifted our gear from current to the old way. If you had to start from zero, where do you start and what would you do different? That's what we discussed, and I think that's what I have taken pointers on what we discussed today. With this, we would like to conclude the session, and thank you for being part of it, Ravi. And to the audience, we have streamed this podcast live onto LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We hope you found this topic useful and valuable for. And thank you for joining us. Our next episode is scheduled tomorrow. That is we are again talking about threat, where the AI mistake that kills companies is what we are talking about at 6:30 p.m. IST tomorrow. And I have put a scroll where you can reach Ravi on the scroll which is going on the screen. And with that, we would like to conclude. Ravi, you have any final pointers that you want to tell before we conclude to the audience, Ravi?
So yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Prem. It was an honor being here and then getting an opportunity to share my insights, right? And I may be wrong somewhere. I would really want all the practitioners to kind of forgive me wherever I have gone wrong. I am still learning as a part of my journey, but I hope this whole session, the question answer, was informative to the people, right? And they should be able to kind of gain even slight value, and they should start that mindset shift that we were talking about primarily, because it is not just about having a small project at the corner. It should be a program, and identity should definitely be the center of the entire program that CISOs and CIOs they are learning.
With that, I think you made an important pointer, and I would like to tell Ravi and the audience is that with AI and the evolving changes that are happening, it is a daily learning, and we could make mistakes. Whatever we've spoken is more about the personal experiences that we have as a person in the cases or the projects that we've worked, and those use cases is what we've discussed. We are not naming any organization
Uh,
or any project that we have implemented. We are discussing on a generic way and see how we can add value to the listeners is what we are trying to do part of this podcast. Ravi, thank you for being here, and it's been an honor to have you here, Ravi. And with this, I would like to conclude the podcast. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, audience, for joining us. We are overshooting by 3 minutes. Sorry for that. And there was a technical issue that had some issues where my audio was not syncing up in the start of the session. Apologies for that. Thank you.